We often imagine power as something loud, something that dominates, controls, manipulates. But the truth is, real power is quiet. It's not about reacting, it's about reclaiming. And when you're dealing with a narcissist, nothing is more powerful than the moment you stop feeding the fire they live off. The moment you choose self-respect over approval, boundaries over begging, clarity over chaos, they start to lose everything they had over you. Narcissists don't ask for explanations because they want to understand you. They ask because they want to control the narrative. Every time you over-explain why you're hurt, why you're drawing a boundary, or why you said no, you're feeding their strategy. You're giving them more rope to twist around your self-worth. They don't want clarity. They want control disguised as confusion. The longer they keep you justifying your actions, the longer they stay in the driver's seat of your emotional life. You begin to doubt your reality, you second-guess your instincts, and eventually you stop trusting your own voice. But here's what changes everything. When you stop explaining, you begin to show up from a place of inner authority, not external permission. You don't argue, defend, or overshare. You state your truth and hold it. Instead of saying, I didn't mean it that way, you say, that's not okay with me. Instead of saying, I didn't mean to upset you, you say, I'm allowed to express how I feel. This is how the power dynamic shifts. You stop asking for validation and start standing in your values. The narcissist loses because the fuel they depend on, your emotional reaction, is cut off at the source. Your calm becomes threatening. Your silence becomes louder than any explanation ever could. And that's the secret they don't want you to know. They don't fear being challenged. They fear being irrelevant. Guilt is a tool narcissists sharpen like a blade. Not because they're hurt by your boundaries, but because your boundaries threaten their entitlement. The moment you draw a line, they'll make you feel like the villain. They'll say things like, you're overreacting, you've changed, or after everything I've done for you, it's all meant to pull you back into the cycle where your needs are negotiable and their comfort is law. But here's what you must remember. Emotional boundaries are not walls, they are clarity. They don't push people away, they show people how to treat you. When you hold emotional boundaries without guilt, something profound happens. You take responsibility for your energy and let go of their emotions. That is where freedom begins. You realize it's not your job to manage how someone else reacts to your truth. Your job is to honor your peace, not convince someone why it matters. Narcissists lose access to you when you stop apologizing for taking care of yourself. When you no longer explain why you need space or justify why you won't tolerate disrespect, you become untouchable because guilt no longer works. Emotional blackmail no longer sticks. And the truth is, when you've been conditioned to please, to soothe, to always be the good one, guilt will scream the loudest right before you break free. That's the test. That's the turning point. To sit with the discomfort, let guilt rise, and let it pass. Because you are not abandoning them. You are finally choosing not to abandon yourself. And in doing so, the narcissist loses the power to use your own empathy against you. Narcissists are masters at creating chaos and then blaming you for the mess. They bait you with half-truths, passive-aggressive comments, and emotional hooks designed to pull you into a reactive spiral. They want you loud, emotional, off balance, because when you're reactive, you're easier to control. The more you talk, the more they twist. The more you respond, the more material they gain to flip the script and paint themselves as the victim. But here's what dismantles their entire strategy: silence. Not the kind rooted in fear, but the kind rooted in clarity, stillness, inner strength. When you begin to say less, they start to lose their grip. You stop explaining every decision. You stop correcting their lies. You stop jumping to defend yourself every time they distort the truth. You trade over communication for quiet observation. You begin to study their patterns, not argue with them. And from that place, you gain a kind of power they can't touch: emotional neutrality. That doesn't mean you're passive. It means you're intentional. You're no longer reacting from a place of hurt. You're responding from a place of wisdom, or not responding at all. You start asking yourself, is this even worth my peace? And most of the time, the answer is no. They thrive on reaction. Your silence, it's unbearable to them because they don't know what you're thinking. They can't predict your next move. And more importantly, they can't control you. When you observe more, you stop personalizing their behavior. You see the pattern. You see the manipulation for what it is: a cry for control, not connection. And you rise above it, not because you're cold, but because you're done playing their game. Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy, it's self-respect. And when you choose peace over proving a point, the narcissist loses everything. Your attention, your energy, your emotional availability, and nothing terrifies them more than your indifference. One of the deepest emotional traps we fall into with narcissists is the belief that we can change them. That if we just love them better, explain it differently, stay patient long enough, they'll finally get it. That the person they pretended to be in the beginning is still somewhere inside, waiting to be awakened by your loyalty, your pain, your sacrifice. But that illusion is what keeps you stuck. The truth is, narcissists don't want to change because their behavior isn't unconscious. It's calculated. It works for them. They manipulate, gaslight, lie, and shift blame, not because they don't know better, but because doing so gives them power, control, and supply. Hoping they'll suddenly wake up one day and treat you with empathy is like watering a plastic plant and waiting for it to bloom. You exhaust yourself, lose yourself, and they stay the same. What breaks this cycle isn't fixing them. It's choosing to change you. Not who you are at your core, but the habits that keep you stuck. People-pleasing, over-explaining, ignoring red flags, mistaking survival for love. You begin to heal when you stop turning yourself into a mirror and start becoming a boundary. Changing yourself doesn't mean becoming harder. It means becoming wiser. It means shifting from how do I get them to love me to why do I keep giving them that access? That question is where your freedom lives. You stop asking, why are they doing this to me? And start asking, why do I keep allowing it? And from there, you begin to build a life they no longer fit into, not out of revenge, but out of evolution. Because your healing is not dependent on their transformation. It's dependent on your decision to stop shrinking for someone who refuses to grow. And when you make that shift, when you stop fixing and start evolving, the narcissist loses their place in your story. Not because you forced them out, but because they simply can't follow where you're going. Narcissists operate like emotional puppeteers. They build a system where your worth is constantly on trial, and they're the judge, the jury, and the audience. One day they shower you with praise and affection. The next they pull it all away, leaving you desperate to earn it back. This cycle conditions you to perform for love instead of receive it. You find yourself doing more, giving more, sacrificing more, just to feel seen, validated, or simply not discarded. But here's the harsh truth. Approval from a narcissist is a moving target. No matter how much you do, it will never be enough. And that's not because you're not enough. It's because they need you to believe you're not. That's how they maintain control. The moment you stop competing for their approval, the entire power dynamic shatters. You no longer dance for their applause or suffer from their silence. You stop asking questions like, do they still care? And start asking, why am I waiting to be chosen by someone who keeps wounding me? This is where your healing begins, when you recognize that their approval was never love, it was leverage. And you don't need to earn what should be freely given. Choosing not to compete doesn't mean you stop caring about connection. It means you stop abandoning yourself to gain it. You shift from trying to impress someone to expressing your truth. And that truth says, I am already worthy. I don't need you to tell me that. You reclaim your identity, you start defining your value from the inside out, you build your own mirror instead of begging to be reflected in theirs. And here's what terrifies them. When you stop reacting to their approval or rejection, they realize they no longer own you. They lose the ability to control your emotions with a compliment or punish you with silence. You stop performing, and in doing so, you step into authenticity. That kind of power can't be manipulated. That kind of self-worth can't be touched. And that's when they truly lose you, not because you walked away in anger, but because you finally stood still in truth. Narcissists expect a scene. They expect tears, rage, begging, or breakdowns. They anticipate an exit that centers them, where they still feel powerful even as the relationship ends. They need that drama because it allows them to rewrite the story. You were unstable. You couldn't handle them. You were the problem all along. But the most disarming move you can ever make is to walk away without giving them a show. No last word, no final fight, no desperate attempt to be understood. Just clarity, calm, a quiet door closing. Because silence isn't weakness, it's emotional mastery. When you leave without fanfare, you deny them the emotional fuel they crave. They don't get your anger to manipulate. They don't get your sadness to exploit. They don't get your confusion to twist. They're left alone with the one thing they can't stand, themselves. You didn't leave to prove anything. You left because you realized that explaining, defending, and waiting was only costing you your energy, your joy, your identity. The real power is in the stillness. You reclaim yourself the moment you stop needing them to see your worth and start walking in it quietly, boldly, without delay. This kind of exit doesn't make noise, but it echoes. They feel it when your number stays blocked, when your silence becomes permanent, when they go to push the buttons they used to and find there's nothing left to press. That's not revenge. That's evolution. Doesn't mean you didn't love them. It doesn't mean you weren't loyal, forgiving, patient. It simply means you finally love yourself more than the chaos they offered. And that's what narcissists truly lose when you walk away without drama. Your attention, your availability, your emotional access, they lose the power to shape your story. Because now you're the one writing it. And you're doing it without them. The greatest shift you'll ever make isn't loud, it's not explosive, it doesn't look like revenge or bitterness. It looks like choosing peace over chaos, truth over performance, and self-respect over chasing love that was never real. Narcissists don't lose when you fight them. They don't lose when you yell, beg, or cry. In fact, that's when they feel most in control. But they lose everything the moment you stop engaging. When you stop explaining, stop reacting, stop fixing, and finally stop showing up for the role they wrote for you. That's when the game ends. You weren't crazy, you weren't too much, you weren't hard to love. You were simply in an environment that asked you to abandon yourself just to be accepted. And now you're done. You're no longer explaining your worth. You're no longer proving your pain. You're no longer shrinking to fit inside someone else's comfort zone. You've chosen something greater. You've chosen yourself. And in that bold, quiet decision, a narcissist doesn't just lose you. They lose control. They lose access. They lose power. Because your healing, your peace, and your boundaries, those are the things they can't touch anymore. You didn't destroy them. You simply stopped letting them destroy you. And that is how everything changes. One of the most exhausting battles you'll face with a narcissist is the war over reality itself. They rewrite events, they deny your experiences, they twist conversations into knots until you're questioning your memory, your feelings, even your sanity. This is not miscommunication, this is manipulation. It's gaslighting designed to disarm you, to make you rely on their version of the truth instead of your own. But here's the truth they fear the most. You don't need to argue to be right. You don't need their agreement to know your reality is valid. The moment you stop arguing with their delusions is the moment you reclaim your mind. You no longer waste energy trying to prove what you lived, what you saw, or what you felt. You stop trying to make them get it. Because deep down, they do get it. They just don't want to admit it. Because admitting it would mean giving up control. When you protect your reality, you start living from a grounded place. You journal it, you name it. You stand by it. You refuse to let your truth be voted on or gaslit away. You hold it quietly but firmly, like an anchor inside you that no storm can shake. And what happens then? The narcissist starts losing their favorite tactic, confusion. When you stop arguing, they can no longer spin circles around your mind. When you stop debating, they can no longer keep you tangled in doubt. They lose the power to distort your identity because you've stopped seeking clarity from someone who thrives on distortion. Your reality doesn't need their permission. Your truth doesn't require their validation. And your peace begins the moment you say, I know what happened, I trust myself, and I'm done explaining it to someone who doesn't want to understand. That's not weakness, that's emotional maturity. And in that maturity, they lose one more weapon. They lose control over your perception. They lose the ability to shape how you see yourself. They lose the access they once had to your mind. That is a loss they can never recover from.